Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Passionate Vegetarian podcast. We're here with Margot.
Hi.
And Chad.
Hi.
And I'm Iriana, your host for the 7th episode of Veteco. Before we get started, if you enjoy our content, don't hesitate to subscribe, leave a comment, like us on YouTube, or rate us on Spotify. All right, let's dive into this November episode. Honestly, today's topic comes from a project we did in class, but we thought it might be interesting to share it with you. That's why today we are going to talk about hoof problem in dairy cows, a real animal welfare issue, but also an economic headache for farmers. It's a subject that's often overlooked, hoof health in cattle. To give you some numbers, since hoof lesion cause about 95% of all lameness cases, they're the second most common disease in dairy cows. And each case of a lameness costs farmers around €250 on average. Girls, what do you think are the signs of a hoof lesion and how can we spot them?
I think a good way to spot a lesion is to watch the cow walking every day. Like, for example, a subtle head lift when one specific foot lands can be a sign of pain in the hoof. Arcs back too. If when they are standing, they are weight shifting every few seconds, pointing a toe or resting on one claw on the other, it can be a sign of discomfort too. And also how they turn tells you a lot too. If a cow is showing discomfort with tight turns on concrete, for example, it can be a sign of hind lateral claw problems. So there is a lot of behavior shift that you can see and that can appear as a response to pain. And they can also be evaluated through a score locomotion from 1 to 5, which 5 being severely lamed, so it can help. However, not every lesion is associated to a marked lameness and very obvious signs. For example, in the Manual of Foot Care in Cattle, and based on studies from the University of Florida around the years 2000, only about 50 to 60% of the cow with digital dermatitis, which is a type of lesion, were visibly lamed, even though the lesion were clearly painful. So it's not necessarily always an indicator. And so to spot them correctly, the best way is to observe directly the foot. It's important checking the sole, the white line, and the heel. And to be able to notice lesions and to name them correctly, we can use the ICARS Claw Health Atlas Codes, which is probably the most widely used international reference for recording and describing hoof lesions in dairy cattle, or the AHDB, Healthy Feeds program for the UK, because sometimes the country can have its own model, and it helps diagnosing the lesions for the farmer and even vets, thanks to uniform standards, one clear definition and images.
Okay, you've really detailed your answer. And Jad, do you want to add something?
Totally, I agree with Margot. You can usually notice it through lameness, like the cow won't walk normally and it might put less weight on one leg. But there's not only lameness, there also can be visible changes in the hoof itself or in the way the animal behaves. For example, the cow might be more nervous or lie down more often or even show sign of discomfort. So nothing really to add, and just agree.
Yeah, so you just start to talk about the indirect signs. So Margot talked really well about the direct ones. And for the indirect one, they could also have a drop in milk production and isolation from the group. And we can also spot some lesion if we do a close inspection of the animal with wounds, ulcers, or crack on the soles or the coronary band. As you said, we need to check the white line and see if there are some cracks or maybe black marks. That was our little introduction. So, to begin with, let's try to understand what hoof lesion actually are. There are many classification systems around the world. And do you know some types of categories that we can have about the lesions?
There is a lot of different types. There is infectious, inflammatory, all of the things that is related to erosion, so maybe mechanical lesions. And that's the most that came to my mind now, but
Okay.
I know there is
That's
lots.
really good. You have any idea, Jean?
I was just thinking of infectious and mechanical, so
Okay. You talk about infectious diseases, but there are also deformation and conformational abnormalities. We can talk about ulcers and necrosis, or cracks and hemorrhages, or even heels and soles problems. So the hoof lesions aren't always infectious. So that's the case with deformation and conformational abnormalities. They can be caused by an imbalance in the way the cow bears weight on their hooves, abnormal hoof horn growth, or chronic locomotion issues. Examples will include asymmetrical claws, where one claw is noticeably wider, longer, or higher than the other. These mainly affect the hind limbs and disturb proper weight distribution, leading to uneven horn wear. And this makes the animal more prone to other lesions like sole ulcers or sole hemorrhages on the part of the hoof that touches the ground. We can also talk about corkscrew claws, where the outer or inner claw twist. And basically, instead of growing straight, the claw curves to the side. The result is uneven weight bearing, improper horn wear, and too much pressure on one part of the hoof. Lastly, the scissors claws, where the claw tips cross over one another. And this uneven weight distribution increases the risk of white line lesions. And the white line is basically the junction between the hoof wall and the sole. And so that can also affect the joint due to misaligned phalanges. Now let's move on the second category, the infectious diseases. What do you think causes these lesions?
I think it can be caused by some microorganisms, for example, bacteria.
Exactly.
They can enter either from an augmentation of permeability of the hoof, or from like a lesion, physical lesion that allows the entrance of bacteria.
Exactly. Something else to add?
Yeah, I agree. And if we take a step back, there is like the origin of all of this problem are often related to fragility, as Chad said, or to a bad environment.
Yeah, like a dirty or humid environment. So this group is the most common and often the most painful. Examples include digital dermatitis or Mortellera's disease, a highly contagious lesion at the back of the hoof, often triggered by moistures. There's also the interdigital dermatitis, a more superficial inflammation between the digits, and the interdigital phlegmont or foot rot, which is a deeper infection causing swelling and fever. It's important to note that not all cows with digital dermatitis are actually limp. Some can have severe lesions without showing obvious signs right away. Now we can go to the ulcers and necrosis that are very painful lesions. Theirs are deep wounds beneath the sole, often linked to excessive pressure on the hoof. And the common examples are sole ulcer, this is the most frequent one, the heel ulcer, and the toe necrotic or ulceration. They aren't very contagious, but they appear when body weight is poorly distributed. For instance, due to hard flooring, poor housing design, or neglected trimming. Last month, we talked about animal welfare. Do you think a lame cow still meets those welfare standards? And what impact might these have on her production? Sorry.
So for the first part of your question, I do not think lame cow meets the fundamental welfare principles. Because physically her well-being is compromised because it violates 2 of the 5 freedoms, which are freedom of pain and discomfort and freedom from disease. And in terms of production, I think there's a clear impact because, as you said earlier, I think a cow in pain will produce less milk.
Yeah.
And it also tends to affect their fertility and reproduction field.
Of course.
So ultimately, this reduces productivity overall.
Yeah, I fully agree. I don't think it meets this principle because she will be in pain, will not be able to move, to eat, and to lay down normally. And this discomfort doesn't just affect her mobility, it triggers a whole chain of negative effects. Like a lame cow will can for example eat less because of the pain. Her dry matter intake will drop. Over time she could lose a body condition, which would weaken her immune system and increases her susceptibility to other diseases. So you also can see a decline in milk production, sometimes up to 10 or even 15%, which is a lot, depending on the severity and the duration of the lesion. And it also affects the reproduction. So it's at the end economically significant for a farm. And as you said, Diana, each case of lameness costs around 250 euros once you add the lost milk, the fertility issues, and the treatment expenses. So it's a lot at the end.
Yeah, you said everything, and I agree with you. So now let's jump on the fourth category. Well, it's not really a category, but we will talk about cracks, hemorrhages, and white light diseases. These involve damage on the hoof wall, often caused by trauma or poor home qualities. For example, there are vertical cracks like a split in the claw, the sole hemorrhages. We see some little red patches after trimming. There are signs of internal trauma. And there is the white line disease where the wall separates from sole, allowing stones or bacteria to enter and cause painful abscesses. So why do you think the white line is such a weak point of the hoof?
I think it's because it's a junction area between two different parts of the hoof that have distinct composition and structures. So basically, it's a transition zone between two tissues that don't bond perfectly, so it's naturally more fragile, and that can explain why separation or cracks can easily occur there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I fully agree. And that's, you talk about the white line disease, and it's actually one of the most common cause of lameness, according to the ICAR Close Health Atlas. So that's a real problem, and this fragility is making the foot at risk.
Yeah, exactly. Now that you said everything, let's go on the sole and heel problems. Does affect the wave-bearing surface on the hoof, often caused by moisture or overly abrasive throwing. And as every time, I have some little examples for you. The double soles that are 2 layers of horn stacked, showing disturbed horn growth. There is also the thin sole, where excessive wear leaves the horn too thin to protect from pain. And finally, the last one, the heel erosion, often forming a V shape caused by a damped bedding. So we've seen that hoof lesions have multiple causes, sometimes mechanical, sometimes infectious, and often both. But as the saying goes, prevention is better than cure. And that begins with genetic selection. Some cows are simply more predisposed than others to developing lesions, just like some people have weaker ankles. Little question for you. How can we select cows with better hoof health?
In genetic, we can use indexes to select the best potential matches. To put it simply for our audience and for people who don't know what an index is, it's like a score that shows the strengths and the weaknesses of each animal for specific traits. So by breeding a cow with a good foot structure to another with similar strengths, we can improve hoof health in the next generations. Of course, that's a simplified explanation. The perfect code doesn't exist. So we always need to balance between different traits like milk production, body conformation, and even social behavior. But the main idea is to include food health in the selection process, not just to focus on productivity, because in the end, we have seen that both are closely connected.
Yeah, nothing to add. I was thinking of the indexes too and genetic markers. So that's it.
Yeah. These index take into account animal performance, production, health conformation, parental and offspring data, and sometimes genomic data obtained by DNA analysis. They are updated regularly. So more offspring an animal has, the more reliable its scores become. It's a bit of refining your score average every year. So in dairy breeds like the Montbéliard or Holstein, there are several types of index and some concern confirmation, as you said, and we will see for the hoof. So in recent years, a specific hoof health index has been created, accounting for resistance to both mechanical and infectious lesions. Farmer can then use this data to match genetics, identifying weak points in their herd, then selecting bulls whose indices compensate for those weaknesses. This genetic matching improves the next generation for milk yield, longevity, or hoof health. And with genotyping, the direct DNA analysis, these choices are now faster and more accurate. We no longer have to wait for a cow to hatch to know her breeding value. We can predict it early on. But genetics alone isn't enough. Even the best cow won't stay sound if she lives on a slippery wet floor. Between genetic and environment, which do you think has the greater impact on hoof health?
Okay, that's a trick question.
Yeah, I know.
Because actually both are essential. You can have the best genetic in the world, but if the environment isn't suitable, for instance, if the floor are too hard or the hygiene is too poor, hoof problems will still appear. So, well, and the opposite is true. Even with great housing and management, a genetically fragile cow may still develop foot issues. So realistically, it's about balance. But if we really had to pick one, I think I'd focus more on the environment because it's a factor we can directly control and adapt. And even with a weaker genetic, you can still reduce risks by improving housing condition and management, whereas a perfect genetic won't make up for a poor environment.
Yeah, I fully agree. Genetics, of course, plays an important role because it helps in the long run by improving the resistance of future generation to many mechanical or infectious lesions. But if the housing condition, as Jade said, are poor, even the best gene will not compensate. The environment is what a cow will experience every day. Things like flooring, bedding, space, humidity, and hygiene will directly affect the hoof structures and the way weight is distributed. And as we said, it causes a lot of issues on the long term. So if the floor is too hard, too smooth, or full of slurry, even a strong and healthy roof could end up with a problem.
Yeah, you're totally right. So as you said, both matters, but the environment is crucial. So the first factor is obviously the flooring. In most dairy farms, cows work on concrete, solid. This is solid, easy to clean, but this is very hard. And hard surfaces, especially when smooth or poorly maintained, increase the pressure on certain hoof zones, leading to uneven wear, cracks, or ulcers from repeated friction. Roof and concrete can improve grip, but it still wears the home excessively. Have you ever seen rubber mats in barns? And do you think they're truly useful or it just like luxury comfort?
I've never been to a farm or a barn, so I don't know, but I saw when we did our work
Yeah.
that's it's usually used. And I also saw a name like the Magellan's mat. I think it's a certain form, and it's used a lot in barns, and it's really useful because it's not hard floor, but it still has grip.
Yeah.
So that it's not slippery, and it also allows a good drainage. So the Magellan's mats are rubber mats, but I
Yeah,
don't know
maybe.
if all rubber mats are Magellan's mats.
Well, I think the Magellan mats are a specific kind of rubber mats. In reality, to complete, softer surfaces like rubber mats distribute weight better and reduce slipping. So cows walk more easily and are less stressed. With these mats, healing rates of existing lesions can reach up to 80%, and digital dermatitis cases drop significantly. Now about rest. A cow spends around 12 hours a day lying down. If her bedding is uncomfortable or damped, she stays standing longer, which is bad for her hooves. A good bedding should be dry, thick, and clean, and the best materials are straw, sawdust, and or sand, provide there's enough, at least 15 centimeters, and it's renewed frequently. Stalls that are too small or poorly designed also cause problems. Cows hesitate to lie down, bump themselves, or stay standing in alleyways. That prolonged standing increases hoof pressure and leads to lesions. So space matters too. When cows are overcrowded, they move less, get pushed around, and lower ranking ones can't access the cubicles easily. So too much social stress means more standing time and thus more pressures on the hoof. That's why we recommend around 10 meter squares per cow in loose housing and at least 1 cubicle per cow on stated floors. Below that, it's overcrowding. What do you think are the risks linked to humidity, ventilation, and hygiene?
I think excess humidity is one of the main risk factors because it softens the horn, making it weaker and more porous. So it can let the bacteria penetrate more easily. And that's why often we see lesions like digital dermatitis, heel horn erosion, or foot rot in wet environments. And studies and also the Atlas of Icar clearly showed that moisture and slurry accumulation are major drivers of these infections. For the poor ventilation, it's a bit related to what we just say. It beneficiates to an humid environment because of the air that can not dry the floors or bedding properly. So the constant moisture can lead to maceration of the interdigital skin, for example, making it fragile and opening the door to infections such as the interdigital dermatitis and other erosion too. Also, the temperature can be less regulated, and we know now that warm and humidity increase heat stress, which cause cows to stand longer instead of laying down, and that extra time on their feet puts more pressure, as we say, on the clothes. So this actually been well documented by a lot of people, this phenomenon, mostly Cook in 2003 and Buxton in 2001. So yes, that's interesting seeing how small changes can affect and impact the feet that much. And finally, porogen, maybe it's a bit more obvious, but it amplifies everything. Bacteria and debris can accumulate easily around the feet, which leads to other infections too.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, nothing to add. Just the combination of all three, high humidity rates, poor ventilation, and poor hygiene just increase the risk of infection and lesion.
Yeah. And to deal with hygiene, we can have a regular alley cleaning, whether it's mechanical scrubbers, hydraulic systems, or manual cleaning several times a day. But the goal is to stop cows walking through slurry or wet bedding. Do you know about foot bath, or have you ever heard about foot bath?
Yeah, but I can't remember the products used in foot bath. I just saw that dry foot bath are more and more used.
Yeah.
So that's all I know on foot bath, I think. But
I don't have the composition of the foot bath too. I probably need to check that. But we filed with disinfectant solution. I don't know which disinfectant solution exactly. And that's goes walk through regularly. They help prevent infections like digital dermatitis. And to avoid milk contamination, foot bath must be placed after the milking area.
Yeah, I think something that is interesting about this thing is it's a good tool if it's used correctly and cleaned regularly.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, it's a place where all of the coal will pass, and it can be actually
place of bacteria.
Yeah, a good point for contamination and
Yeah.
and infections.
Yeah, you're really right. So we've talked about many possible improvements, but maybe the best treatment for lameness is simply a return to nature. Walking on grass is softer, cleaner, and allows cows to move freely. Their gait improves, lesions heal faster, and they are more relaxed. It's like us. After a day walking on hard floors, stepping barefoot on grass feels wonderful. Now, even in ideal conditions, hooves keeps growing. If they don't wear down naturally, they will start growing unevenly. That's where trimming comes in. So what is exactly trimming? It's a preventive care procedure similar to a pedicure for cows, but not for dogs. The aim is to restore balance, wave pairing, between the two claws and remove any overgrowth or damaged horns. On farms, trimming is usually done by a trained hoof trimmer or a vet using proper equipments, a restraining crush, and specialized cutting tools. The trimming serves two purposes. The first one is prevention, spotting and correcting early issues before they cause lameness. And the second one is early detection, finding small hidden lesions invisible when the cause worse. So there are two main techniques, preventive trimming and curative trimming. Do you know the difference between the two?
Preventive is when there is apparently no lesion or issues that we can detect, and curative is in the goal to cure actually the lesion in question.
Yeah, exactly. I will detail it a little bit more. So the preventive trimming is usually done twice a year at drying off and before turn out to pasture. It checks hoof balance and prevents excess pressure on weak areas. When it's done correctly, improvements are visible quickly. Cows walk more smoothly, rise more easily, and some studies show 30% drop in shoulder pressure after trimming. And for curative trimming, so that is for a cow already lame. The technique is similar, but the goal is different. It's to relieve pain. For example, there is a sore ulcer. The dead horn is carefully removed and a block is glued to the healthy claw, so the wave shifts away from the injured hoof while it heals. Pain management is essential. Some trimmers use anti-inflammatories or local anesthetics. And beyond short-term comfort, regular trimming has lasting effects. Cows move more freely, spend more time eating and lying down, and milk yield improved. Biomechanical studies even show that the hoof's wave-bearing surface increased about 45% after trimming, reducing pressure on sensitive zones. It's also an excellent opportunity to assess herd health. Trimmers can spot early lesions, note their frequencies, and help farmers adjusting housing or diet accordingly. But trimming isn't trivial. If done poorly, it can actually weaken the hoof, and removing too much horn exposes sensitive tissues and creates new pain. That's why it must always be done by trained professionals with sharp tools and proper restraint. And even though trimmings help a lot, it doesn't replace other measures. Good hygiene, proper flowering, and regular herd monitoring remain essentials. If you were in charge of those cows' welfare, what would you prioritize first? There's no wrong answer. I'm just curious.
I would say like the first one will be environment, by hygienization and the structure that will help a lot, and also will improve the healthcare in general of the cow because it has a huge impact on it, not just on the food. Then I would probably say the genetic, as we talk, is a very important thing to consider to help improving on the long term the health of our animals.
Yeah.
And finally, I would say the nutrition too, because it's actually very important and it has a lot of impact on the food too.
That's really interesting. And what about you, Jeanne?
I think I agree on the environment one as the first point, like the hygienization and structure. But for the two others, I maybe do the opposite of Margot and put nutrition first and genetic third, but first, second, and genetic third, because I think I prioritize everything in the environment first, like have the best conditions and then focus on genetic. I don't know how to explain, but for me it's
okay.
Yeah. I actually agree, and it makes sense. Honestly, my two last points are quite equal. I just needed to put an order.
Both can be second.
But actually, I think genetic is also important because it plays a very important role in the long term. And if we want to have a better health in general, genetic and selection is a parameter to consider for. You're right, not the short term if we think like that, but in the long term for the new generations.
And also, the difficult part is that genetic can influence the alimentation and the structure, because if we have a cow that has some genetic particularity, we can adapt environment and nutrition. So in reality, everything goes together. Having a top like 1, 2, 3 is difficult. I think everything should be put on the same
level.
On the same level.
It's not just for tickling you. Thank you for your answers, girls. Indeed, nutrition is essential in preventive system for the food health, but it's a very large topic that could deserve a full episode. If you want to know more about this subject, don't hesitate to tell us. So we've seen that hoof health lies at the crossroad of genetic, environment, care, nutrition, and animal welfare. With healthy hooves, cows are more comfortable, more productive, and therefore more sustainable. That wraps up today's topic. We hope you enjoyed it and learned more about our dear dairy cows. Thank you for listening, and we will see you again on 8th of December for the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.